Hey there, it's Sunday. I was just looking at what you can see in the mirror. Just some piled up towel from my shower and a sweater I'm going to rewash and a sweatshirt I wore once. Anyway, nothing is either good or bad. Thinking makes it so. It's a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. And I'm saying it in response to what I would normally think is a bad thing, right? Like, I don't want my dirty laundry to be in view when I'm recording a video. I don't want to hop on video when I literally just crawled out of bed. But it's not bad. That was my human aspect, judging myself, judging my experience, judging my surroundings. These are my surroundings. This is the truth. I am just a human being, and I'm allowed to get out of bed at some point. I'm allowed to have a point between the time when I wear a piece of clothing and I wash it. Like, there's a time in between there that's allowed to exist without judgment. And so I was seeing this quote from a deeper level, right? Like, it's something I've been working to do. I've programmed myself to let go of programs. You know, ironically, I had to program myself to do that, but it's very effective and helpful because as I do that, my consciousness expands and I become more and more free and embody my higher versions, highest self and soul version, and feel myself being guided and allow my heart to open more and more. But I realized that when I do deem something good or bad, it actually causes it to be in my reality. Wow. So if I've said something's bad, and that means I'm judging it as bad, right? And what will happen, I've found, is that it's going to show up in my reality. Stronger, harder, louder. In order for me to have repeated opportunities to let go of, to surrender my judgment of it. Because if it's something I'm noticing that I don't like, I'm going to notice, because I've programmed myself to release limitation and judgment, I'm going to notice that it is a judgment because it keeps showing up, right? And there are some things that are harder to notice because they just kind of feel like the backdrop of the story I've been telling my whole life, or the template that I came into life on, or something that I needed to resolve from past lives even. So this is really like allowing myself to crumble old templates in order to live something new. And old templates are only held up by the story that I was telling, which may have been just the story that was told to me, which is that something is bad. So examples that I can think of in my immediate existence that I'm just letting go of now is people who manipulate others, people who lie and trick others, pranksters, tricksters, people who live in filth, people who take advantage of and lean on other people for help, people who kill. Those are all things that I had deemed bad, or people who leave laundry piled up and don't present themselves as perfectly put together at all times. But those are all things that I had deemed bad, so that means I held a judgment for them, which means that they'll show up in my reality, giving me multiple opportunities to surrender my judgment. Those are actually just experiences. Those are just experiences. So when I lose my judgment to it, when I stop telling the story about it, I'm not limited to living in that story any longer. I will live out the story I'm telling. So there may be someone who has an argument for, but it is wrong, and you can't say it's right, and it's like, well, That is your story, and that is your judgment. But if you would like to stop living that reality, maybe you could look at other ways to see that same topic. Maybe you could loosen your mind around it to find other possibilities for that topic. Like the person that we witness living in filth, perhaps they are learning something for their own soul's evolution. Perhaps they're learning their own value. Perhaps they're learning that their value doesn't change dependent on the different ways that they choose to live throughout their life. Maybe they're learning to value themselves in order to lift themselves up. Maybe they're learning that you can get disease from living in filth. Like, whatever they're learning, I can't know better for them and their experience than they do. It's their experience. My experience is mine. So my experience was judging that, which, yes, on one hand, kept me from living in filth. I wouldn't want to do that thing that I think is bad, right? So that's nice, but maybe that comes from a lifetime that I did live in filth. Maybe. And if I want to hold a judgment against a part of me who may have lived that myself, that is going to keep me in separation and limitation and carrying a burden of judgment, which is energetically heavy. So I can be present with the way I feel about those things. Like, maybe I did live a lifetime in filth, right? Like, maybe I lived in the time when the plague came and it was spread through rats. And so maybe I have a severe judgment and a grudge against living in that kind of filth because of that, because I feel the pain of the suffering that it can cause or has caused for me in previous lifetimes, let's just say. So I now need to spend time being present with what it feels like to accept that I feel that way, to accept that I have fear, a program of fear and a story to tell about that. Now, in actuality, there are plenty of people who have rats as pets, and they don't actually die of disease, they don't contract disease, and they're able to keep their pets clean and so on and so forth. Like, having a rat in your experience, hold on one moment please, or having the experience of an interruption, it doesn't have to mean what it used to mean with the story we tell. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It just has to be, right? Like, I can take that interruption in stride. And that's actually literally something that I am working through with these realizations. It's like that interruption does come from someone who seems to interrupt me a lot and who I have found bothersome for that reason. However, that's the story I'm telling. Where does that story come from? Immediately when I ask myself that, the first thought that comes is, oh, my parents used to always tell me to go play. My parents did not like it when I came upon them. And one time when I came upon my parents who were having a discussion by themselves, my dad actually elicited my help in completing suicide. So the consequences for me interrupting my parents was pretty high stakes, was traumatic experience, and not only that, it was trained in me and mirrored and the example of shooing kids away or not succumbing to interruptions was shown to me as an example by my parents repeatedly throughout my childhood, during the formative years, the first 7 years where programming takes place. So also the judgment of how I may appear because I just climbed out of bed would be like, it comes from the programming and the idea that I've literally seen many people in my culture, my surroundings, in my school, on movies, in my peer group, comment on the way other people look. And so then there's this thing where we might try to become more beautiful or more appealing or more acceptable in our appearance based on the fact that we don't want somebody else to project their own judgment of good or bad onto us. And what I've realized is whether or not we approve of somebody else's appearance or disapprove of somebody else's appearance, it is very arrogant. It's a very egoic thing to actually share and comment on such a thing when we're not asked. And when we are asked, it surely has to come from an insecurity about our own self and our own disability to take care and responsibility for our own care, our own self-image, our own story. If we're looking for somebody else to fill in the blanks on our story about how we look, that's actually giving away our power about our story. And you can see how this kind of just all can be solved by taking responsibility for ourselves, our story, processing the feelings, being present, and letting go of those judgments so that we can let go of those old stories and those old ways of living on earth. Because there is a new way to live on earth available to all of us, to everyone who chooses it. It's exciting.